So now I want to move on to talking about the key nutrients from meat, fish, and milk, and where they are in plant-based diets, how you can get them, and if there are advantages. So we're going to talk a little bit about protein. We'll talk about vitamin B12. And in meat, poultry, and fish, iron, we could talk about zinc as well, but we're going to talk just about iron, calcium, and we're going to talk about EPA and DHA from fish. So those are the nutrients that I've chosen to cover. And you can see they're not all there. We could have talked about vitamin D from milk, but I had to be a little bit selective to keep within the time. So the first question is, can we get enough of these key nutrients from plant foods? So where protein is concerned, I love this. Dan Pizarro did this cartoon, and it says, it's this little guy here, this little rodent down here, saying to this big gorilla, no meat at all. Are you sure you're getting enough protein? and really the point being that the largest land mammals on the planet are vegetarians. And they seem to be able to build these huge muscles without any meat. And so we probably can too. And this is Derek Tresize, or Tresize, I think it's Tresize. He says, no meat, no problem. He's a vegan bodybuilder and has been for many years. And I think if he can do it, probably the rest of us can too. Yeah. Pretty impressive. So how much protein, the big question is, how much protein do we actually need? Well, the RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. And of course, a kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So we need a little more for infants and children per pound of body weight, or per kilogram of body weight. We need a little bit more for athletes, possibly more for seniors and people eating whole food plant-based diets, maybe plus 10% because of the digestibility issue. And so where we talk about digestibility, if you look at protein digestibility, fiber in plant foods reduces the amount of protein you can absorb into your bloodstream because you lose some in your feces. And so let's take a look. Well, you absorb about 92 to 96% of the protein from things like white bread or flour, soy protein isolate, peanut butter, tofu. So more the foods where the fiber has been extracted, right? So the fiber's not reducing the absorption. That's about the same as you get from beef, milk, eggs, cheese, all of those things. You absorb about 94 to 97%, so right in the same ballpark. But you can see that you absorb less from oatmeal, 86%, lentils, 84%, other legumes around 72 to 89%. And so that's why we have that 10% added in to allow for that little bit of loss in the feces. And the digestibility, however, is increased by soaking, sprouting, cooking, blending. When you break down the plant cell walls, you increase the availability of that protein. So all of those things can help. So let's talk about average requirements. Well, average requirements, this is RDA again, women 46 grams, men 56 grams per day. Now, if we add the 10% onto that, it would be about 51 grams for women and about 62 grams for men. So this is all kind of gobbledygook or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't mean a lot when we talk about grams of protein, so we need to look at how much protein is actually in food as well. But first, the seniors, this is a whole other issue which we're just starting to learn about. We don't actually have a separate RDA for seniors in North America, although protein digestibility and protein synthesis are reduced. And there is a separate RDA in some countries like Australia. So in Australia, for people 70 or older, the recommendation, their RDA is about 25% higher than it is for younger adults. Well, you can imagine the challenge because seniors eat less. They need fewer calories. And so if you need fewer calories, but you need more nutrients, that can be a huge issue. It means you don't have as much room for cookies. You don't have as much room for the foods that don't provide a lot of nutrition. So that's important. The consensus is actually building that around a gram per kilogram per day, up to 1.3, reduces age-related muscle loss in seniors. So for people who are vegan, that means that they may want to consider having things like very highly available protein foods, like hemp seeds, like tofu. And these kinds of foods can be very helpful for seniors. So what are the actual intakes for vegetarians and non-vegetarians in terms of protein? And we've talked quite a lot about the Adventist Health Study 2 and EPIC Oxford. Well, in the Adventist Health Study 2, take a look at this. Meat eaters averaged about 75 grams of protein a day, vegetarians about 70.6 or 71, and vegans about 70.7. There's not a big difference between any one of those groups. It's really quite interesting. Whereas in EPIC Oxford, we saw a little bit bigger range with the meat eaters getting closer to 100, the vegetarians around the 74, and the vegans around the 67. But all of them were well above that sort of recommended intake of 46 grams or 56 grams for men, or even adding that 10%. So all well within the recommended range. So now let's take a look at how much protein is actually present in plant foods. So here you've got soybeans, tofu, veggie meat are all around, somewhere around 20 to 30 grams generally. That's really similar to what you would get from a serving of meat, poultry, or fish. And then we see a fair bit in legumes like lentils and other legumes, about 14 to 18 grams in a cup of legumes. And then you see the foods like hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds and intact grains like kamut, spelt, amaranth, quinoa, all somewhere between 8 and 13 grams per serving. That's very similar to what you would see in a couple of eggs or a cup of milk or an ounce of cheese. So very, very similar amounts. And then you get little bits from all the other plant foods, like nuts and oats and spinach and other vegetables. So you're getting bits in just about everything you eat. So if you think about needing 50 grams or 60 grams of protein, well, all of these options provide you with about 15 grams. So you might need, how many servings of maybe 4, 5, 6 servings of these foods, depending on your needs. But a third of a cup of sprouted peas, a half a cup of almonds, sunflower seeds, or peanuts, a cup of lentils or beans, 3/8 of a cup of pumpkin seeds, about a pound of broccoli, which is a fair bit of broccoli, or 2/3 of a pound of kale, about a third of a cup of firm tofu, 3/4 of a scoop of pea protein, or 2 cups of quinoa. So what I want to point out is if we look at meat versus some of these plant foods, this is important. So ground beef has about 39% of calories from protein. One ground beef patty has about 22 grams of protein. So let's compare to tofu. Tofu has 41% of calories from protein, and about 0.55 cups of tofu would give you 22 grams of protein. So very, very similar serving sizes, very similar amounts of protein. On the other hand, if we compare ground beef to spinach, for example, well, ground beef has 39% of calories from protein, as we said, 22 grams of protein. Well, spinach also has 39% of calories from protein. However, because it's so low in calories, you would actually have to eat 25 cups to get 22 grams of protein. Or you could cook it, and then it would be about 4 cups cooked down. So you need to understand, some people say, oh, well, the percent of protein in broccoli or spinach is the same as meat. But in fact, because they're so low in calories, you would have to have quite a large volume to give you the same amount of protein. So plant-based eaters generally get plenty of protein unless they get insufficient calories. How many people get insufficient calories? Not that many, right? Most of us amble along reasonably well getting enough calories. The people that don't get enough calories are people who are sick or people who are anorexic, right? And so they may not get enough protein if they're not getting enough calories. And then the people that eat nutritionally inadequate diets that are low in protein. So for example, people that are eating high-fat, high-sugar junk food diets, they often don't get enough protein. Sometimes I see teenagers come in and they wanted to become vegan because of the animals or the environment, and they just drop meat and milk from their menu. So instead of a burger and fries, they get a double order of fries with their Coke. They're not going to get enough protein. And so that's an issue. And then the others are very poorly planned fruitarian diets, because fruit is a little low in protein. It's between 1 and 10% of calories from protein. We need about 10 to 15%. So if all you eat is fruit, you may not get enough protein. So if you're eating a diet that's very high in fruit, you would need to be eating some nuts and seeds and greens and so forth in the mix. So what are the most healthful plant choices? Well, legumes. Legumes are really the plant protein powerhouses. So the best choices are the ones that are not stripped of their value before we eat them. Beans, peas, lentils are really wonderful. Soybeans and the products like tofu, tempeh, and edamame that aren't highly processed are also really good options.